Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. My name's Nikki LaFoyle and welcome to day 4 of the Craftsy Sustainable Stitches series, where different instructors teach different reusable projects that use up your fabric scraps, upcycling, mending projects. So be sure you check out the previous videos in the series, and tomorrow on the last day of the series, Katrina Walker is going to be teaching you how to make a tea cozy that looks like a kimono top. So that's super cute. Make sure you tune in for that. But in this video, I'm going to be showing you how to make these reusable fabric gift bags. They are super cute and they're super sturdy. So a lot of times with those disposable gift bags you'll buy, technically they're reusable for like 1 or 2 times, but the handles might break, they might tear, they'll get crinkly and they won't look good anymore. But these bags are super sturdy. We're using interfacing in the outer and the lining fabric. So give them as a gift to somebody and they can regift them and regift them and regift them. Or honestly, they might just like to keep them for something in their house because they are super cute and super handy. So it really is like giving 2 gifts in one. There is a PDF for you to download for this project. There'll be a link underneath this video. So if you haven't grabbed that PDF, make sure you do that. And you'll have that for reference. It's got the supplies list and the full instructions for this project, dimensions for all the fabric pieces and everything like that. But I am going to be going through all of the instructions here in this video. And if you are watching live, you can, if you have any questions, type those into the comment section and I'll see those and get any questions answered for you. Or if you just want to say hi, let me know where you're watching from. Let me know what fabrics you will use to create your gift bags. I would love to hear from you. So make sure you download that PDF and let's take a look at some of the features of this bag because there are a couple of cool features that I want to bring to your attention. So here at the corner, we have, it's not a typical boxed corner. So in a boxed corner, the seam will go all the way down to the bottom. But here we have this cool like triangle feature here, which just makes it a little bit different. And I'll show you, of course, how we achieve that. And the other neat thing is at our handles. So for the handles, of course, you could use grosgrain ribbon, twill tape, webbing, something like that. But I really like using fabric for the handles. It creates a nice look and it also gives you the opportunity to do some top stitching. So I have some top stitching lines here. Top stitching is one of my favorite ways to add detail to a project. And in this one, you might be able to notice I use the Sulky Blendables thread. So you can see here, we've got some red, we've got some green, and we've got some white. So it's a variegated thread. So you get a subtle effect there, just something that makes it a little bit different. And it looks really nice on a fabric that is a little bit more solid. So I've got my dark blue and some green here, which is why I use, this is my lining fabric for the bag I'm making in this video. I thought it would pop a little bit better on that fabric than this pattern. I thought it'd get a little bit lost in that. So those are really cool. It's a really cool thread that, and again, that's the Sulky Blendable. So let me show you some of the colorways here. Okay, isn't that beautiful? So you can go on sulky.com and here's my Christmas one. So we've got green, red, and white in there. So go on sulky.com, check those out. And Sulky has sponsored the Sustainable Stitches series. So for the week of the series, they have 35% off all of their individual threads. It's just site-wide. You don't need a discount code or anything. The sale price is already on there. So definitely check those out. And I have used the 50 weight cotton thread for all of my construction seams as well. And they have a gajillion beautiful colors of those. So check those out. It's kind of like if your fabric stash is getting out of control, for me, thread is almost the same thing. They're just so beautiful. So definitely check those out. And we have some people saying good morning. Hi from Alabama. Hi, Susan. Illinois. Debbie in Illinois. Lindsay in Cincinnati. Teresa, good morning from Kansas. And Christy, hello, another from Illinois. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Karen, also in Illinois. Many Illinois people here. So let's dive into this tutorial here. So for the tutorial, I am creating this little size bag. So we have a 6 by 6 bag, and our corner is 3 inches. So we have a 3-inch wide boxed corner here. And in the PDF that's available to you, I give different dimensions for the fabric pieces to create different sizes of bags. So you can create some different sizes for different gift giving needs, but they're all going to be 3 inches wide. So they all have the same boxed width. And the handles are all the same size. You can make the handles longer. That's a really easy change to make to this. And no matter what size you're making, the instructions are going to be the same. The process is all the same. So let's take a look at what we need here. So for this size, I have my 10 by 16 pieces. So my outer fabric and my lining fabric, 10 by 16. And then we want to fuse your interfacing to the wrong side. And I have used, I say medium weight in the supplies list. It's kind of up to you. I like how sturdy that medium weight interfacing makes this. And I used Pellon Decor Bond 809 for the outside. And then for the lining fabric, I did use something a little bit lighter weight. So you can kind of play around with the different interfacing combinations, but you can tell the interfacing, it changes the hand a little bit. So this one is a little bit lighter weight than this. But the Decor Bond 809 makes it really nice and sturdy and stiff. And using something lighter weight on the lining, just it's stiff enough without kind of going overboard. So fuse your interfacing to the wrong side of your body panels and then set that aside. And for your handles, we have 3 by 10 strips of fabric for your handles, and the interfacing is 2 by 10. So you want to center the interfacing on the wrong side of the handles to fuse them. And then let me switch over my camera here so you can see my workspace. There we go. And we have some viewers from outside the US, Argentina, and the UK. Good morning. So on our handles here, we've got our interfacing fused, centered, and then you're going to fold the raw edges over the interfacing edges and press, and then fold that in half and press. So get that all pressed, and then we're going to do our top stitching. So pull my machine in here. And the Sulky Blendables thread is a 12 weight thread, so it is a little bit heavier weight, which makes for really great top stitching. So we're going to top stitch this open edge just about 1/8 of an inch from the edge. So just catching that edge to close that up. And when I'm top stitching, I like to have my stitch length a little bit higher. So my machine defaults to a 2.5 millimeter stitch length. I like to increase to a 3 millimeter length for my top stitching. So I'm just holding this in place and letting the feed dogs pull it along so I get nice straight top stitching. And then we're going to flip it around and go on the other side, and we're going to do the same thing. So this is purely decorative now, just to give us some symmetry here. and to make sure we get some beautiful top stitching. We're doing the same thing on the other side, just about 1/8 of an inch. And then I'm going to do 2 more lines of top stitching in the center here. You can do as many lines as you want. I'm just going to go for 4 altogether. All right, and then you want to, I'm going to just use the edge of my foot. I'm aligning the edge of my foot with the edge of the strap, and that's going to evenly distribute my lines of stitching along this strap. But you can kind of measure and mark if you want to, or you can just kind of eyeball it. You don't need to be perfectly equidistant. We got some Midwesterners here. Marsha from Michigan. I'm also in Michigan. Sonia from Minnesota and Donna from Wisconsin. Good morning, everyone. And then I'm flipping this around and again, aligning the edge of my foot with the edge of my fabric for my last line of top stitching. And there we go. It's our beautiful variegated thread. It gives that cool, subtle look of depth to the project. So you're going to do that to both of your handles, and we're going to set that aside for a moment, and then we're going to grab our outer fabric first. Let's scoot this over. So your outer fabric, we're going to start by folding this in half with wrong sides together, which feels weird, but there's a reason for it. So we're going to fold this, matching your raw edges. And then at this fold here, we're going to measure 1.5 inches from the fold. And I'm just going to pin, and I'm going to just pin through both layers at that raw edge. And then spin it around, do the same thing on this side, 1.5 inches, because we're doing a 3-inch boxed corner. So getting a 1.5 inch from the fold, that's going to give us our 3-inch at the corner, or for the width. And then we're going to fold our layer back at the pin. We're going to do that for both of the sides. And Christina, good morning from upstate New York. Good morning, Christina. Christina says, I don't even know how to thread my machine, but I'm hoping watching these videos will motivate me to try it. She says she's intimidated. Well, good on you for jumping in here. Once you figure out how to thread your machine, it really opens up so many possibilities. And there's tons of great tutorials on craftsy.com and on nationalsewingcircle.com as well. So check those out. So in our fold here, we've got our 1-inch fold in between. And then I'm going to put a couple pins right here and on this side. And I need to change out my thread, so bear with me a moment. Get my blendables off of there and get my 50 weight cotton on. When you are first starting out sewing, Christina, it does seem intimidating. But if you find a good resource like Craftsy or National Sewing Circle, it can really make all the difference. So when we sew, we are going to stitch using a 3/8 inch seam allowance. So 3/8 of an inch from our edge. And we're just going to sew all the way down our side seams. Back stitching at the beginning. And back stitch at the end. Flip her around and do the same thing on the other side seam. All right, and I always like to press open my seam allowances before I move on to the next step. It helps us with the next steps just by making sure everything is nice and flat. So we're going to open this up. A lot of times you might be excited to get to the next step in the process and skip pressing your seams. I'm just going to go like this. I'm going to leave that flat, but I'm going to open up each side of the seam allowance here. Denise, yes. So for my outer fabric, I used Pellon. It's is the brand, and the type is called the Corbond 809. So it's a fusible medium weight interfacing. It gives a nice crisp feeling to these bags. And then for the lining, I used something a little bit lighter weight. I think it was also Pellon. I think it was a Pellon, maybe a featherweight or sheer weight. I don't quite remember. Hello, Michelle. Hello, Sandy. Thanks for tuning in. Okay, so once we get our seam allowances pressed open, we're going to fold this right side out so you get to see these corners and how these corners get created. It's pretty fun to turn this right side out. And then you get your little triangles. So there's the outside of my bag, my little triangles. So we're gonna take this, actually, let me scoot this out. And before we do our lining, we want to get our handles attached here. Judith, my iron, this is actually a Singer Memento mini press. So it is good for getting in little places. It's just a press. There's no steam to it, which is the only thing, but I do like how small that is. So let's see. So to attach our handles, we're going to take our handles and we're going to go 2.5 inches in from each side seam. Now this is the only place where it's going to be a little bit different if you're doing a wider bag. Obviously, if you're doing something wider, you're going to want to put the handles in a little bit closer to the center. But for this one, we're going 2.5 from the side seam. So I have this kind of laying flat, and at 2.5, I'm going to take one of my handles, and that's 2.5 is where I'm aligning the outer edge of my handle, not the inner edge, the outer edge. And if you used something fun on the right side of your handle, you want to make sure the right side of your handle is against the right side of your bag. And I'm going to pin. You can take this to the machine and baste to make sure that that's not going anywhere. I'm just going to pin. And 2.5 inches from the other side. We're going to spin that and get the other side of the handle pinned on. And then on the other side, you don't really need to measure. You can just kind of go off of where your handle is aligned on the other side and match that up. So pin or clip so that your handle raw edges and the raw edges of the bag are aligned. All right, so there. Got our handle on our bag, and we're going to set this aside real quick, and we're going to work on the lining. And Rosemary says, I imagine this can be easily sized up for a tote bag. Absolutely. As soon as you know, you might have to do a little bit of, experimenting with the different sizes. If you want the box to be wider here, you can play around with that, and keep in mind that if you're changing the size of the box, some of this, this width is getting taken away from the height of the piece of fabric that you cut. So it has to then get turned into the bottom. So yeah, absolutely play around with that. Play around with the sizes and use that, the little triangle box corner technique for other projects as well. So we're taking our lining fabric, we are folding it in half with right sides together this time. And we're going to stitch our side seams, and you want to finger press a little crease in the bottom. And then we're going to stitch one side seam all the way down using, again, our 3/8 inch seam allowance. And then on the other side, we're going to leave an opening. So you want your opening to be, I usually do like 3 or 4 inches, like the width of my hand. If you're making a larger size, you might want that opening to be a little bit larger. And I want my opening to be more toward the upper edge of the bag because I don't want my opening to be down here where the lower edge here is going to get turned into the boxed corner. So I want my opening to be a little bit more up toward the top. So stitching this side seam, we're going to backstitch at the beginning and then backstitch at the beginning of the opening, because you don't want that to be coming undone as you're turning things right side out. And then we're going to jump over the opening and then start again and backstitch again at the other side of the opening. And we're going all the way down. And you could definitely use the same like triangular boxed corner technique that we used for the outer bag, but that keeps a little bit of the bulk in the corner. So we're doing a more traditional boxed corner for the lining so that we can cut some of that extra fabric away. All right. Now to box the corners on this lining, actually, see, I was going to skip this step. We're going to press open our seam allowances. I still do that. I still get excited to move on and skip pressing. Christina says, thanks, I hope so. I won a sewing machine and then was gifted a secondhand serger and single needle embroidery machine and feel guilty. I don't know how to use them. Time to learn. You know, I have also had a serger in my closet for many years, and I do technically know how to use it, but I just always use my sewing machine, and I actually feel guilty that that is sitting in my closet too. I definitely need to use that more. But good luck on your sewing journey. It's so fun to learn, and you know, I've been sewing for many years and I am still learning new techniques, and it's just the techniques you learn can be applied to so many different projects. So it's a really fun hobby. So pressing your seam allowances open, it's also going to help us when we go to close up this opening in our lining. It's going to help us get a nice even line. Okay, so we are pressed open. Now to box these corners, what we're going to do is open this up and flatten this out. And if you've ever boxed a corner before, this might be familiar to you. So we're going to flatten that out so we get a nice triangle right here. And we want to make sure the side seam is aligned with that crease that we made in the bottom. So I poke a pin through right through the seam and make sure it lands right on that crease, and it does. So I'm going to pin that right there. And then we are going to mark a 3-inch line straight across this corner, because again, we have our 3-inch box. So I'm going to align the 1.5-inch mark on my ruler with the seam, and then move the ruler so that the beginning of the ruler is at the fold, and then the 3-inch line is also at the fold. Let me grab a marker. Mark myself a line. And then we're just going to stitch directly over this line. Back stitch, beginning and end. then we can cut off this excess bulk, leaving about 3/8 or 1/2 inch from the seam. And then we're going to flip it and do the same thing on the other side. So we're going to kind of fold this down. Check that we are even. There we go. Make sure that side seam aligns with that lower edge crease. We're going to go align my 1.5 inch with that center seam, or with that side seam. And then make sure your 3-inch mark is at the fold and the start of the ruler is at the fold. We get a 3-inch box on our corner, so it's going to fit perfectly in the outer bag. All right, and then we're going to clip this off. Christina asks, do you prefer to use pins or are clips easier / better? That is really a personal preference. It also actually does kind of depend on what material you are working on. If a material is able to be pinned through, I prefer pins just because I know that they are going to hold exactly where I want them to hold. But if you are sewing with a material that is too thick to be pinned through, like if you have a really, really thick interfacing, like a Peltex, or if you are using faux leather or vinyl, something that you don't want to put pinholes through, clips are good for that. So we have our lining. We have our corners are boxed, so we have dimension there. Now we get to put the whole thing together. So we're going to take our outer bag, tuck it inside of the lining. Might have to finagle it in there a little bit, but if you use the same seam allowances on both, it should fit together. So make sure your handles get tucked in between the layers. Juanita says, adorable, great stash buster. It really is. And if you're using, or if you're making a small size, the fabric requirements are really little. And even if you're making a larger size, you can use some of your fabric scraps for the handles. And then you'll have something useful. So we're tucking our lining and our bag right sides together. And we want to align the side seams at the side. So I'm going to put a pin in there, put a pin in on this side, and then just make sure the raw edges are aligned all the way around the upper edge. I'm going to just put a couple pins in all the way around here. All right. And again, we're using a 3/8 inch seam allowance. And if you're making this small size bag, it might be easier for you to remove your machine bed. slide this on here. And because we left that opening in the lining, we're just going to stitch this whole circumference. It doesn't matter where you start. I'm just going to kind of go slow and make sure I spin this around. And as you go over your side seams, make sure that those side seams remain open. I love these projects because it's so fun to create different bags for different occasions. So you saw my one bag was Christmas themed, and the other little bags I've made are they're kind of Eastery colors. They'd be great for birthday gifts as well. I have a daughter, so we're typically giving birthday gifts to girls, which makes it really fun to be able to get fabrics for some really bright colored gift bags. Rosemary asks, will this tutorial be available for later view as recording somewhere? Yes, it will. You will be able to watch this video again as needed. All right, now I've reached where I started, so I'm going to backstitch. My iron's turning off on me. All right, now we get to reach in the opening that we left and start pulling things right side out. So just a little bit at a time. I do too, Sandy. The outside triangle corners are just kind of a nifty, unique thing. Normally, when you see boxed corners, it's just, you know, your typical boxed corner. So this makes it a little different. So we're just pulling things right side out gently. There we go. Now, once we get our bags right side out, before we go to tuck our lining back down in, we need to close up our opening. And you can do this however you want. You can take a hand sewing needle and thread, and you can do a slip stitch to close that up and make it really invisible. But I'm just going to bring this over here and top stitch the edge. It won't be that visible. It'll be on the inside of the bag anyway. Lourdes says, I missed info before. What kind of stabilizer used for the bag for structure? So on the outside of the bag, I used Pellon Decor Bond 809, which is a medium weight fusible. You can use the same thing for the lining as well, or you can use something a little bit more lighter weight, like a featherweight or a sheer weight. Just something that is still going to give it a little bit of structure, but it doesn't necessarily need to be as stiff as the outside. So I am just edge stitching this opening really close to the opening, just making sure I'm catching both of those folds to close up that opening. So we've got that stitched shut. And then we are going to tuck that lining down inside. And you kind of nest the boxed corners of the lining down into the corners of the outer bag. So it is taking shape, and it is so cute. So we want to also press the upper edge here. So you want at your upper edge, your lining and your outer fabric to be right at the edge there. And I'm going to give it a press to make it nice and crisp. And then we are going to be doing some top stitching around the outside. Karen says, I love the triangle corners. I've made many bags and never thought of making box corners this way. I also think this is a really good beginner project. Plan to share with my granddaughters. That is fantastic, Karen. And I agree. It is a cool beginner project. It's all straight lines. It's all, straight seams. It's, rectangles. And you make something at the end that is super cute. And I think it's a good confidence builder. So to get your fabric to come right to the edge here, you can kind of roll it in your fingers to make sure you're not accidentally pressing any fabric down in between that seam. So making sure it's right up at the edge. And you can use your blendables here to do your top stitching. But since I've got my cotton thread already threaded, I'm just going to use that for this one. All right, I'm going to press just a little bit more right here, and then we're going to be good to go. So when we top stitch this upper edge, we're going to go, again, kind of like how we did on the handles, go right about 1/8 of an inch below that upper edge, and we're going to go all the way around. So I'm going to bump my stitch length up again. So bump it up to 3 millimeters, which is what I like for my top stitching. And I'm leaving my machine bed off so that I can just slide this up over the machine. And we're going to go just edge stitching, just about 1/8 of an inch. And I am not back stitching actually as I'm top stitching, because this is going to be such a visible line of stitching. Sometimes when you back stitch, it makes like a little lump of thread. So instead of back stitching, I'm going to pull my threads to the wrong side when I'm done and just tie them off manually. So I'm making sure that my lining isn't poking up over my outer fabric as I'm going around. And go slow if you need to. There's nothing wrong with that. Lower your stitching speed if you need to get nice, even top stitching. Nancy, is your sewing machine specifically for left-handed sewers? Just love the beautiful result. It is not. I'm sewing on the FOF Passport 2.0, which I've been sewing on this machine for many, many years. And it is so sturdy, and it can handle absolutely anything that I want it to sew through. It's just a great little machine. So as I'm approaching where I started, I'm not going to backstitch again. Going to pull my thread out. So I'm leaving myself some long thread tails since I'm going to be tying this thread off. And on the inside, so I'm going to take my bobbin thread and I'm just going to tug so that my my top thread comes through. So I'm using a pin to get that loop and just pull that thread to the wrong side or to the lining side. This is how I like to tie my threads off a lot of times. Just to avoid the possibility of getting those thread lumps. There we go. So we have all 4 thread strands on the lining side, and I'm just going to kind of tie them all off together. And then I'm just going to clip my threads close to the knot. Clip my other threads that I've got. Clean that up. And then we have our beautiful finished gift bag. So we have our nifty little details, and our bag is super sturdy and strong. You could reuse this guy forever. And not only for gift giving, honestly, but for just kind of keeping things in. For as a tote bag, as we were talking about earlier, the larger ones especially. If you make some longer handles, you could use that for a tote bag, absolutely. Anne asks, which foot are you using? I'm just using my all-purpose foot. So I know I talked about earlier aligning the edge of the foot with the edge of the handle. That does depend on what width your foot is. So I used my foot to align to get equidistant lines there, but I'm just using my all-purpose sewing foot on my FOF machine. So there we have our gift bag. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Thank you for all your questions and your comments. And if you haven't already, make sure you download the PDF. There's that link just under the video that has the supplies list and the full instructions for our bags and dimensions for different sizes of bag. Sandy says less than an hour, definitely going to make this bag. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sandy, for tuning in. Yeah, it comes together really, really quickly. So you can buzz some of these up in different fabrics, and people love getting a gift in a handmade gift bag, fabric gift bag. It makes your gift that much more special. So make sure you check out Selkie.com as well for the Blendables thread and for all their beautiful threads, 35% off until tomorrow at midnight for the Craftsy Sustainable Stitches series. Again, thank you all so much for tuning in and watching. I hope you enjoy this project, and you make yourself some of these beautiful gift bags. Thanks. Bye.